Libertarians, of course, are always going to debate over the most important issue, which is who is a real libertarian, and finding which people in our movement and which pundits actually live up to the standard. And then if we ever apply that sort of debate to politicians, for the longest time, that's only ever been low level politicians and just like the few like Massey and Rand Paul who have actually, or like Justin Amash, who actually ever made it to Congress. With Javier Milei, this is the first time in history where that debate has now gone to a leader of a state in the world. And so tonight we're going to revisit that again. Is Javier Milei a libertarian? Are his policies working for Argentina? What can we learn from what he's done, both the successes and the failures? That's what we're here to talk about tonight, live here in the LCI Green Room. Hey everyone, I am Jacob Winograd. I'm your host most of the time here. I'm still trying to get the rest of my gang here at the Christians for Liberty Network to step up, maybe be a little bit less, they're too stuck in the podcast world. They're not as hip as I am, I guess, with doing the live shows. Doug's done a couple. I think Alex needs to do more. I think Alex, host of the Protestant Libertarian podcast, would be actually very good at hosting some live shows and some live interviews. He's been on of course, all the CFLN hosts have been on with me at various points, but not many do it on a regular basis, but that's fine. I'm happy to be not the only host, but I guess the most regular host of the Green Room. I am the only host of my own show, the Biblical Anarchy Podcast, which comes out bi-weekly. We just had an episode where, that's actually an interesting debate. Total sidebar. Is it bi-weekly or do you say every other week? Because bi-weekly can mean twice a week. But yeah, my show comes out every other week, to be precise. And we just had an episode come out where we went over two hard questions for Christians, especially within political considerations, which is, are Christians permitted to vote and are Christians permitted to serve in the military? That second one's especially something to be thinking about right now as tensions rise up with Iran, and there's already a increase in the amount of those who are enlisted filling out and filing the conscientious objector forms to try to get out of getting in the never-ending march towards World War III. But tonight, we're not here to talk about American foreign policy, at least not directly, and we're not here to talk about even America, as I said in the cold intro. We're going to be talking more about Argentina, Argentinian politics, and Javier Milei, who it's now been over 2 years since he was elected, which I will say, no matter where you land on him, it's at least something substantial in the development and history of those who value liberty and libertarian thought, that someone who ran on a campaign of quoting Mises and Rothbard and Hoppe became the head of a state. And so that's still pretty cool, no matter where else you land on if he's been governing effectively. So over a year ago, I actually hosted a debate on the topic of if Javier Milei was good for Argentina, a good representative of implementing libertarian ideas to the public and implementing policies. And that was between Jeremiah Harding, who I just actually had on a few days ago. We had him on Monday night, and his debate opponent, Jeremiah was in the negative. Jeremiah is critical of Javier, but he debated our guest for tonight, Skot Sheller, who I'm going to bring up now. Scott, how you doing tonight, man?
Great to see you, man. I'm doing well.
Yes. This will be your second time on the show, the first time where you're going to be riding solo. You're one of the lucky chosen few who came on first to jump into the debate ring with Jeremiah nonetheless. And there were definitely, that was a very friendly debate, but there was definitely some fireworks and contentious moments, but I definitely recommend people go back and watch that. I had to go back and rewatch it and pull the transcript up to pull some points because I thought it'd be good to go back and reevaluate some of the things that we talked about then and see where we are now, see what we got right, what we got wrong. before we get into that, though, and tonight's conversation, do you just want to reintroduce yourself and who you are, what it is you do, your background, and anything else interesting?
Yeah, for sure. I live here in New Hampshire. I'm a free stater. I moved here in 2018, and um, I became interested in Argentina most mostly after I met my wife. She's Argentinian. Her father was an Austrian economist in Argentina, and he knew this guy named Javier Milei. Before I met my wife, before Javier Milei became uh, popular at all. And so when Javier Milei became popular in Argentina, I started to follow him. My wife corresponded with him, and I just watched his rise. I could never imagine that he would become president. So yeah, so I've been following him for so long, and he retweets me a lot, like about 60 times, and so I just follow the news every single day. I follow what's going on, and I try to show the English speaking audiences what's going on in Argentina, because a lot of people miss out because it's all in Spanish and because it's so far away, especially what's going on in the news on a daily basis. So it's sort of a passion of mine, and it's cool because I get to follow along what's going on with my family in Argentina, and it makes me it's a little bit more of an investment for me. So yes, so that's my background with Argentina, and I really love the place, and it's something that's a passion for me for sure. Beautiful country.
Yeah, I've never been to any of the South American countries, but I also know people who live there. I also have friends that live in Ecuador, and I, I have too many young kids right now. But at some point, either when the kids are older, we can take them with us, or when they're old enough to be left with grandma or grandpa for an extended period of time. My wife and I definitely want to do some traveling, and South America and definitely Argentina is among the destinations we'd love to go and explore and look at. Uh, so yeah, Javier Milei, as I said at the beginning, and I think that no matter where you are, and I think even the critics of Milei need to at least admit that his victory is something substantial in just libertarian history. And I honestly just when I was watching him kind of rise to fame and that he was running, I just completely wrote off any possibility of him winning. And I'm sure there were people who were closer to the situation, who understood the way electoral politics work down there, who were, they were all along. I saw them saying, like, no, he's actually got a pretty decent chance to win. And I was just like, no, there's just no way. It's just like, it's like we could barely get, a couple libertarian and we could barely get a couple libertarian congressmen here in the States. And there's libertarians who say those guys aren't even real libertarians. So I was like, like for all the, like, listen, I love Rand. I love Massey. I love Justin Amash. Of course, the OG Ron Paul. None of them ever were like, up in front of the entire country quoting Rothbard and Hoppe, right? So, I mean, just I was like, when you hear someone like, quoting the deep magic, right? So to speak, you're like, okay, well, that's cool, but like, there's no way they can win. So the fact that he won, now I don't know how much of that had to do with the fact that he was quoting Rothbard and Mises and Hoppe, but still, I just think it's really cool. There's definitely got to be, I'm sure, you probably know this more than I do, although I've encountered more people since his victory. Like I'm part of a whole Discord group that's just a bunch of uh, libertarians and liberty activists from Argentina who were like part of that grassroots movement to support his rise. I'm sure he introduced a fair number of people in Argentina to libertarian ideas and started a libertarian revolution there. So that's, beyond just evaluating policy and whatnot, just that alone, I think puts me in the disposition to be semi charitable towards him, even though I do have my own criticisms of him that we can definitely get into. But I mean, what's your sense in just in terms of how he has served to help maybe not just reignite whatever libertarian movement was already there, but also grow it and uh, just sort of fundamentally change the not just political but cultural landscape in Argentina?
Well, before Milei, there just wasn't a libertarian movement at all in Argentina. And I know because my father-in-law was an Austrian economist, a very free market guy, and he was completely discriminated in Argentina. He was bypassed for promotions. He was censored on the radio. There was nobody that really there was no libertarian movement. There was my father-in-law and like five different people. And Milei came onto the scene, and he first started doing that. We saw him doing the Captain ANCAP, and he's such a genius at just publicity and being a brilliant economist and being a showman, which is very key. Milei was in a rock band. He was in a Rolling Stones rock band. Milei is just has a natural talent at publicity, at showmanship, and that was very important to his rise. And when he finally got on the television and the radio back in like 2016, 2017, his ideas were just out of this world. And Argentinians had never heard the free market story, the free market arguments before, and it blew their mind. It was really fun to watch, actually, because Milei would go on these shows and he would be like talking about the politicians being corrupt and the politicians being the problem and the spending and the deficits and the central bank, and there would be pool blowing up, and it was just incredible television. And through that, my wife and I were just we were just watching this like this little libertarian movement burgeoning in a burgeoning. And you'd see on Instagram all these people starting to make libertarian arguments, and it was really kind of fun to see. It's like, that's a Milei guy, and they would be so unlike Milei, not very diplomatic, not great manners, but they were fun, and that was part of his rise. They called him the Gordos, or the Miller intellectuals. And it was this group of young guys that went on X and became some of the most interesting and passionate people. It was like the Ron Paul movement if you had social media. So Milei's people like became the most influential people on social media, and his opponents really kind of thwarted social media. They were extremely boring on social media. They were typically like the politicians, and then Milei just dominated social media. He used it like FDR used the radio, or Kennedy used the television. So that was Milei. There's never been a politician as good on social media as Milei, and I think even better than Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, certainly more. I mean, more lively than Donald Trump. Donald Trump never held a chainsaw and used it to talk about slashing government. So
Yeah, the symbolism Milei has, the slogans are always the publicity stunts they're so genius.
see,
For
like
example,
like you say that. I don't mean to cut you off, but like I guess just when I was watching them, I just thought people are just gonna think this guy's crazy, right? I mean, because I was like, you go to most normies and you talk about slashing any government program. I mean, there might be a couple that they'd be willing to listen to, but like the chainsaw stuff, the one where of course, the famous "afuera," where he's just like going to every single agency and just like keeps like two and the rest of where. I mean, it was just wild to me that people weren't instantly afraid and turned off by that.
Well, in 2023, when all this was happening, they had 200% inflation. Okay. And
Yes.
that makes you afraid. The prospect of becoming Venezuela and having 90% poverty makes you afraid. The fact that everybody knew that the government was corrupt and that there were many people that had jobs. They call them gnocchis. They don't work but they get paid at the end of the month.
Right.
And everybody knew that it was a problem. Everybody had a sense that the government was messing people over. You couldn't start a business in Argentina. You couldn't import or export in Argentina without a bureaucrat.
So
They had
basically,
export taxes. There was just the banking system. You couldn't use the banking system. They lied about the currency. The currency they said was double as strong as it actually was in the market. For example, when Milei was elected, $1 was 1,200 pesos in the market, but the government said it was 400. The government, so the government said it was almost 3 times so that it was like a price. It was like a price ceiling on the currency, so nobody could use the bank system. And if you wanted to buy dollars, it was very cheap because of the distortion, and only a few people could buy dollars. But if you wanted to buy pesos, like if you're visiting Argentina, it's extremely expensive. If you want to use your credit card, it's extremely expensive. You can't use your credit card. You're going to pay double because that they want. So everything was so bad, and Milei was so good on those things.
yeah.
It becomes so obvious, and when the inflation's getting worse and worse, imagine Ron Paul running with a massive economic crisis. It's sort of like,
and I suppose to some extent, even people who maybe were not, really buying into the idea of a free market, system, were at least just saying, well, this is the only person who's willing to just like cut so much and like maybe give us somewhat of a clean slate compared to the other candidates that like at some point, when you're dealing with such rapid inflation, people don't want to hear someone come in with what could be perceived as half measures or just uh promoting something that just seems like more of the same. So I imagine that went a long way on top of just inspiring a bunch of people to actually look into and embrace the actual philosophy. I do want to get into, so this was a good segue talking about the inflation and the poverty rate. Over a year ago when I hosted that debate, you made a couple more or less predictions that inflation would come down and that poverty would come down correspondent with that. That does seem to have played out when you look at the metrics. I think last I checked, the poverty rate had dropped down to I don't know, like in the 30% range or
it's
something like that.
26% now.
26% now. Okay,
It's about
so
50 when Milei inherited the position.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, so obviously, progress now. Now there is some other data that does seem to indicate that industrial activity, construction, and private sector employment are all down though significantly. So, is the recovery, is it broad? Is it only seen in a few areas? What's your assessment of the the economy there in terms of not just the metrics of just like looking at poverty rate and whatnot, but also just the degree for people and if you had to put it in kind of layman's terms, the degree for your average Argentinian to uh, just try to make a living for themselves and put food in the family, just do kind of normal basic things.
Yeah, so it in general it's better for Argentinians, and also there's a lot of room for growth. Now, when you're talking about the labor force and the industrial growth, the problem with Argentina was they were so bad on business. They hurt the labor laws and etc. were so bad. The taxes for businesses were so bad that they made business impossible. And so what the government did to have any sort of business activity is they would protect them, and then they would subsidize them. And they became this part of this caste. So, and they really, these businesses, literally like businesses that would import phones, and they would import the parts of phones and reconstruct them. Okay. You couldn't just import the phone, right? Stuff like that. These businesses just were not competitive. If you could open up the markets. So, but their products were much more expensive for the average Argentinian. They were terrible for the consumer. So basically, when Milei's opening up the regulations, when Milei's opening up the markets, it's hurting some of these protected, uncompetitive businesses that couldn't compete in a market, that were basically propped up by government. And so when Milei is opening up trade and opening up all the markets and deregulating things so people can actually compete, some of these businesses that are they're like the sort of like the villains in Atlas Shrugged. They basically rely on the government. They're basically get rich off the government, and everybody else is poor. And Milei calls them predatory businesses. And so these businesses are losing jobs. These businesses were getting all these crazy contracts. And so they're like in some of these sectors, there are some of these businesses that are struggling. But overall, but people are getting in some case a little bit cheaper goods like electronics and everything and some other things. So overall, the market is starting to work, and the more productive sectors are actually doing really well, like agriculture. Argentina is very, very known for its agriculture, and they had record agricultural harvests, record wheat harvests, record soybean harvests. So the lifeblood of Argentina, the mining, the agriculture, even the fishing, is the productive sectors are just doing so much better. So that's why Argentina had the highest growth, one of the highest growth rates in the whole world, in all of Latin America, is because their productive sectors are doing much better. And that's because Milei has deregulated them and cut taxes. He's cut the export taxes a lot. He has deregulated them a lot, and thus they are producing more. When you cut taxes and you produce more. So in regards to like the future and employment, Argentina had the worst labor laws in the world. It was basically impossible to be an employer, and there was the amount of lawsuits you had if you were an employer was absolutely insane. Everybody got sued constantly, and they always lost if you were an employer. You couldn't fire anybody. It was extremely hard to hire anybody. And Milei actually just passed, and you had to pay this exorbitant payroll taxes. The employers had to pay 34% for payroll taxes. It was absolutely insane. So Milei actually a couple of weeks ago, actually right before the Iran war, passed a labor reform that I think will cause a boom in their or actually cause their markets to do much better, because it lowered it greatly freed the labor market, lowered the payroll taxes, allowed for more efficient hiring and firing, or cheaper hiring and firing, and essentially got rid of this massive lawsuit problem. That and like they would, even compared to the USA, they would have 10, 15 times more lawsuits than we have in the USA for employers, probably more than that. So this will allow for more hiring, and as Argentina gets as Argentina becomes more trustworthy of a country, as investors and their country risk drop, and which it has been, Argentina is going to get loads of investments, and I think their economy could grow, could continue this rapid pace of growth. So in a lot of ways, wages are higher than Milei took office. There are positives. The industrial output largely is because some of these protected firms are no longer protected.
Yeah, so that makes sense. What about, so you made the point last time that rent deregulation would help with like housing prices, and that certainly does seem to have helped in the macro picture. Supply of housing supply and rent and all that has doubled, and I think prices have dropped around like 25%. So there's on one hand more people getting housed, but there's also been reports of homelessness problems, especially in the city of, and I might butcher this pronunciation, Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires.
Um, yeah, so which their government reported a 30% spike in street homelessness over this kind of same period, with about 300 new people hitting the streets every month at the peak of that problem. So what explains that sort of discrepancy between the housing getting cheaper and more abundant, and yet there being an increase in the homeless problem?
Well, so Buenos Aires, you'd have to go there. It's surrounded by slums. In these slums, I mean, technically they might not be homeless, but these slums and prime real estate were just built essentially overnight. When it rains and stuff, it floods. So to say that you increase homelessness, first of all, I haven't even seen these statistics, and I look at it very much, but I think it's kind of a joke when you look at the huge increase in these slums, and these slums didn't even exist 20 years ago. So so Buenos Aires is in a lot of these places had massive makeshift housing made out of everything you could possibly get, and so this and these things have grown and grown and grown as people have gotten poor in Argentina. So to say that Milei has increased homelessness, when 20 years ago these slums, which housed hundreds of thousands of people, didn't even exist, and people actually could live more in more like proper housing, is kind of rich. The 50% poverty that Milei inherited was prior to Milei. The poor conditions that Argentina experienced was prior to Milei, and by all metrics, from independent resources to the government to UNICEF, when they do research on children, poverty has declined. So poverty has declined quite a bit, and yeah, are there a lot of poor people still? Of course, but are there more poor people? No, there just aren't.
So I figured I'd just bring this up quick since you said you hadn't seen it. So this is, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just going on. This is why I want to have you on, because you have
Mm.
much more on the ground knowledge of what's going on there than I do. But in terms of what's just being reported, so this was an article in the Buenos Aires Times. This was on this is up here at the top, Thursday, March 12th. So just actually today.
Okay.
And They said the figure of the number of people living on the street increasing 30% comes from the official survey conducted in November by City Hall's Human Development and Habitat Ministry, together with the city's
Mhm.
Statistics and Census Bureau, which a nightly snapshot which counted 5,176 homeless people.
Mm.
That was 1,600 sleeping directly on the pavement, in squares, underground station entrances, and hospitals, with 3,500 housed in social inclusion centers, cities shelters for the homeless. And that's compared to November of 2024, where it was 1,236 people were recorded to be living outdoors. So that's where they're getting, I guess, the information from.
Well, I mean, I find it a little rich when, like I said, the you can look at the total slums around Argentina, which if you drive by them or go to them, they're very dangerous. But if you drive by them, you're shocked at how bad they are. And these didn't even these didn't even exist 20 years ago. And if it rains, they collapse, people die. So to try to claim that Malay is increasing homelessness or increasing poverty, I think is a little rich. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people live, not just a few thousand, hundreds of thousands of people live in these slums. 50% of the country was in poverty, and that's not poverty in the United States. That's Argentinian poverty. That's making $200 or less than $200 a month poverty. Okay, so Argentina still has a lot of poverty, but 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 to say that it's getting worse, very few people would say it's getting worse. And then the 200% inflation and what was going on. So, um,
Yeah. No, that's fair. So, uh, there are other accusations that some in, not, you might hear this from liberals, or you hear this from, even some libertarians and anarchists. We're not just saying Milei isn't libertarian enough, or not, just criticizing him and saying his policies aren't working. But there are some who even go as far as to say that he's in some points actually promoting outright authoritarianism or fascism. They'll look at things like expanded military spending, AI surveillance, things that are making it easier for the police to use lethal force, crackdowns on protests, um, and increasingly governing through executive decree rather through the legislator. Um, so, where do you think are there any of those criticisms that you think have any merit? Do you think some of them are just wrong, or do you think some of them are coming from a flawed perspective? What do you say to the types who um, are approaching Malay with those sorts of meta criticisms, and also on those specific points where they think that those specific actions and policies aren't justified?
yeah, so most of those are exaggerations or just don't understand the situation. For example, on protests, Malay still allows protests. What was happening in Argentina is that these groups, and some of them were the unemployed unions, and these groups that got money from the state welfare, that in order to get the welfare, they would have to sign off with this manager, and they called them managers of poverty, and they would take a cut of their welfare. But in order to get the welfare, they would tell them that they would have to march in the streets. And why? Because they to demand for more welfare. So Argentina had over thousands of road blockages a year. And imagine, and especially in Buenos Aires, but all over the country. And they would destroy private property, burn tires, get unruly with the police. And imagine you live in Buenos Aires. It's the capital, but it's also the most populated city. It's where most of the business is ran. And every single day there's a protest and you have to spend an hour in your car. And that's how people had to live. You couldn't even travel anywhere a lot of days because they were protesting and blocking major highways, major roadways every single day. Every single day. And do you know what Milei did to crack down on these protests? He said, if you're blocking the roads, we're going to cut your welfare payments. That's what he said. Corta no cobra. And if your organization is funding this and we have to spend people to get rid of it, we're gonna charge the organization. And so overnight, all these road blockages just went away. So that's that one. On the executive order, the executive order was empowered by the 80 years of Peronist rule. So the country had almost 80 years of one-party rule, with some military dictatorships and some kind of different groups, but that are very similar, that have taken power. And guess what they did? They strengthened the executive order. And what did they do with it? They with the executive order, they started tons of these little institutions and everything else that were woke, like indigenous farming, and there was one, the Institute of Anti-Racism, Anti-Sexism, anti whatever, all the antis. I forget this happened in 2024 and they started all these things by executive order, and that allowed Milei to get rid of them by executive order. So he didn't strengthen the executive order. They did. And what he used to do to do with the executive order is major deregulations, is cutting the government a lot, is cutting the ministries in half. So Milei just took what they did to strengthen the government, strengthen the executive. I think what else did you? One was AI. Oh, I'll do the military at the end. So, and AI policing. So I have not seen any evidence of this. This is just what people say. I haven't seen any evidence this happens. But I will remind you that Argentina has almost a libertarian social. Drugs are not illegal to use. They're decriminalized. So if they catch you with cocaine, you're not going to jail. They'll just throw it away. They don't have DUIs. The country socially is extremely free, and there's no attempt to make it less free socially. Now, if you're like selling drugs, then that's another thing. Those things become their own little states, and they're very violent states, as we've seen in Mexico and other places. But the problem with Argentina was the crime. The crime was terrible, and you couldn't defend yourself. You couldn't own a gun. If somebody was raping your daughter and you caught them in your house and you killed that person, you'd be convicted of murder. Okay? You'd be convicted of murder, or they would destroy you. They would sue you and everything. There was no self-defense rights in Argentina. There was no way to protect yourself. People protected themselves with dogs. That was their thing. You'd have a dog. So if your dog ate them to death, that's fine. I guess it's your dog, but you couldn't do that. So the thing with the security is they want to cut down on crime. Okay, Milei lowered the impunity rate from 16 to 14. So now 14-year-olds are, if they commit a crime like a murder or steal something important, some violent stuff, bad stuff, they get charged like an adult. That's because criminals use kids to commit their crimes because they have impunity. And you see these in Buenos Aires. These kids, what they do is people stop at the stoplights. They do these piranha attacks. They surround the car. One of them has a gun, and they rob the car. So that's one way to get rid of it. So to do it is you have to allow, and if they get caught, no problem. They're immune to any criminal charges. So the problem is crime. So that Milei is trying to increase the security in the country, increase the lawfulness in the country, not crack down on social stuff. Which, like I said, Argentina is pretty already libertarian in that way. So that's the crime, the AI thing. I also have seen no evidence that they're doing it or that at all. And then on the military, so the military, the Argentina's had quite a few military dictatorships. The last one was ended in 1983. And ever since then, they have not invested in the military at all. They have let everything they have besides, I think Menem in the 90s bought a few things, but everything they have is from before 1980s. And it was not even well maintained stuff. They a few years ago they had a submarine that they had in the ocean, and it just sunk, and everybody died. That's how bad their military was maintained. So part of the mandate, and Milei, you have to recall that Milei didn't actually win outright too. Okay, Milei lost in the first round. I'm sure you remember, Jacob. He lost in the first round, and he had to coalition with the center right. And that involved coalitioning with some of these guys that wanted to buy some things in the military. So he put the vice presidential candidate of the center right opponent as his Ministry of Defense, and he put the presidential candidate that he knocked out in the first round. Now it's not a two-party system there. Okay, that's how a libertarian won, and he as his Minister of Security. Well, the Minister of Defense wanted to buy some F-15s, so they bought some old F-15s. Well, they haven't invested in their military in 40 years. So this was part of what people wanted Milei to do. That was part of what the elected coalition wanted him to do. And it's not for offensive capability. It's really just for defensive purposes. So they haven't, the amount that they spend on military compared to the US, even adjusting for GDP purchasing power is pretty tiny, but it's closer to regional standards now. And that's what the people wanted.
So on the AI and policing stuff, so I'll just share a couple things that I had pulled up in preparation for this, and you can let me know what you think. But so this was from Reason. It's a little old, but it's Reason back in August of 24, where they talked about this AI policing plan, which it was Argentina Ministry of Security unveiled the Artificial Intelligence Applied to Security Unit, which is the UIAAS, which aims to use machine learning algorithms to analyze historical crime data to predict future crimes and help prevent them. And it includes facial recognition software, social media monitoring, drone surveillance, and real-time security footage analysis to identify political threats and criminal groups. And then I was able to find this as well, I guess, a more official. I think what appears to be.
I recall this when this has happened, but I recall this when this happened. But I've seen there's a reason why this is back in 2024. It's been over a year and a half, and I haven't seen anything regarding this at all. So
yeah, so the implementation of it is, so some people, I guess, would say that there's two lines of thought from what I've seen, which is that some people are saying that, yeah, there were some things passed, but nothing really came of it because it hasn't been implemented. But then I guess the other question would be, well, maybe it's being implemented and they're just not being forthright with saying, like, here's where all the cameras are, and here, like,
right.
Like, we don't know, like, we know here in America our government spies on us, but it's not like I get a report of the agents listening into my phone calls and things like that. And
Mhm.
one of my browsing history, they they look at. So I mean, I think it's something that is fair to ask. I think it's something it's fair to be concerned about and ask questions about. But I also get your
it's
point, which
fair,
is
but
it would be, you know, the level of alarm would be fair to be like not necessarily say like, well, this is we don't know to. I mean, and I think it's a problem that we don't know, but it is true to acknowledge we don't know the extent to which all of this is being used and implemented.
yeah, I mean, like I said though,
But I think it not
like
to
I
just to
said, the,
say
the,
one
the
more thing.
problem the problem is crime. The problem is violent crime. The problem is theft. Theft was largely legalized. The problem is not cracking down on people doing their lawful things. Milei says everything in the law is fine. Everything outside the law is not. And in the law, you can, you can do drugs. You can do cocaine. You can do all those things. It's decriminalized. You're not, if you have small amounts of it, you're not going you're not going to go to jail. You can even drunk drive as long as you don't kill somebody. They won't put you.
Well, I can. Well,
So
listen, I can.
I'm just saying like that. Like you can protest. What Argentina had a problem with was violent crime, was theft, and these things. And I can tell you horrendous stories about this. Okay,
Oh,
like
I'm sure. Like I don't know as much about Argentina, but I know only a couple people from there. I know more people from Ecuador, including like Christian missionaries who live in Ecuador. I know that just in general in that region, there's all sorts of crime, some associated to
right.
gangs and things like that. So I'm sympathetic to that. I'm just
And
also sympathetic to
crime is way
liber.
down in Argentina, and they're one city that everybody talked about as being like their horrible city, and I loved it. It's a gorgeous city when I was there. It's one of my favorites. Rosario, crime is down 70%, and violent crime, and a lot of people go there now, and they're like, "It's a really nice city." Like everybody's like all the crime and stuff, and I don't see it anymore. So
I
yeah,
think there's some people who are a little bit like when they especially see someone claiming to be a libertarian and then they see him increasing like policing and talking about things like
the
government
problem is
surveillance.
the
It,
problem
it
is Jacob is I discussed this with the free thought guys. The problem is Malek. They like I said, you can't defend yourself in Argentina. Okay, you can't if you kill somebody. Like I said, the example: if somebody is raping your daughter and you kill them, you're a murderer. Okay, you can't defend yourself, right? And Malay wanted to change all these things, but especially in his first 2 years, he had no power, political power, as you know. And to change those, you have to go through the Congress. So, what is the other alternative? The other alternative is you try to crack down on the criminals with the state, okay, and 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 that's the issue. So yes, Malay has actually increased gun rights and is trying to increase like homeowner protection and all that stuff to allow you
would you say it's fair that if Malay is able to increase change on the gun rights and have things that kind of we have here like castle doctrine and stand your ground and things like, if more of that comes to Argentina, would it then be fair to then say, all right, now with this stuff in place, you need to uh, start talking about pulling back at least some of the because listen, I'm not a I'm an ANCAP. I'm not one of the purist anarchists who say it's unjust when state police punish actual criminals, right?
right.
It's not what's unjust is the funding mechanism, right? But the actual
Sure.
service is still legitimate. So I'm not going there. But I do I hear everything you're saying, but I do think it's fair to have very high, especially I think because of here in America, just we know how much this has been weaponized on us, and so just the idea
The
of
cops are
the idea of a libertarian president being the one behind increasing surveillance and things like that is at
well.
least something that is going to be highly scrutinized, even if we can understand that there are considerations about high crime rates and the ability of Argentinians to defend themselves from that criminal activity, as you said, is hindered. It's one of those it's one of those dilemmas where it's like the state creates a problem, the libertarian solution is the optimal solution. If you can't achieve the libertarian solution, do you opt for a state solution in the interim? And there's not agreement on libertarians on which way is right there, of course.
Well, their cops are different than ours. They're completely like traditionally they're completely worthless. Completely worthless. Like they even coordinating with criminals and corrupt. So they won't help you.
But then that could also be kind of a like
that's just the history of Argentina. Their cops are pretty worthless.
But so, if the police are pretty corrupt, if the police are pretty corrupt, though, wouldn't that be a reason to not give them more ability to surveil people and more ability to? I mean, I don't know. I just, I don't know. I'm trying to hear what you're saying, but
they're yes, but they're refocusing the cops more on crime, and that's the goal. So more actually fighting crime. So the emphasis is actually fighting crime and not being corrupt cops. Is it like in some cases it speaks for itself. And now I must say that the provinces do a lot of their own. They just like in the states and the town municipalities do their own policing and stuff. And some of the ones are done fairly well, like Cordoba, and then some of them in Mendoza. And Buenos Aires province is run by a Marxist, and it's horrible. So that's another thing is Milei. I would like to emphasize Milei is actually trying to decentralize the state. He's actually trying to give the power away from Buenos Aires and give it to the provinces. So it's not talked about, and that he talks about how that is the reason why the United States is what it is, the good place, because of the decentralization, because of the federalism, and that's exactly what he wants. Like more like before Lincoln, he really wants the central government to have very little power. So
and it is fair to kind of point out, like I know I was raking you there a little bit, but I think that to your point, there is something where libertarians can be a little bit too ideologically possessed, in my opinion, where like we agree, I think we all should agree at least, that it's better. Decentralization is just always better. And if it's on the table, you do it. And there is the risk, of course, that when you do that, local governments might, in individual instances, start being more authoritarian than perhaps the more centralized power was. But that's just that is a trade-off that you have to live with, because at least if there's decentralization, there is something approximating a competition among these jurisdictions, whereas with the centralized monopoly, without any kind of decentralization or something like federalism, you don't have that. So I think it's fair to I think so if some of the criticisms people have are because of the trade-offs of pursuing that, then I think that's one of those things where you just have to bite the bitter pill that some of that stuff's going to happen in the interim.
Yeah, and I'm just saying that's not like people think that he's centralizing power and they're increasing the police. That's just not the truth. Milei is his part of his labor reform was like decentralizing power. He continues to do it, and he's trying to make the central government as
well, and especially I can imagine. So if you had like a lazy, corrupt, more centralized police force, and then you start to decentralize that and have more of the provinces governing themselves. Well, if those policemen or police forces are being filled by people from those areas who are like, I want these streets safe for my family and for my children, and are fed up with the high crime rates, then, on a human level, you can kind of understand they might be like, we need whatever power we can, get a hold to like make the streets safer. I mean, it's and to some extent, I mean, at least that was kind of the argument Rothbard made too, right? Unleash the police and make the street. It's like almost like I think there's something to the argument where it's like if you have high crime and you don't fix that first, everything else you do is going to be hampered to some extent. So I am sympathetic
They
to it. I'm
elected
just
him to do
also,
it too.
yeah, I just think it's like uh, I'm not pretending I know what the right solution is. I just like I kind of see both sides here, which is why I tend to be kind of I'm always kind of in the middle on the Malay topic. I also wanted to ask you about there's been a couple accusations of different scandals. I guess there was like a crypto scandal that he was apparently accused of being involved in with like one of these things where like a currency comes out and then tanks, and I guess he had I think it was called the Libra
Mhm.
coin or currency. What's the story there?
The story is that because Argentina has been so mismanaged over the years, they have no capital markets. Like they have no way to raise capital really for businesses. And there was a lot of these meme coins, like Trump Trump had one that were going on that were raising a lot of capital and stuff, raising a lot of money, and some of them tanked, some of them didn't. And Malay saw it as an opportunity to potentially try to raise money for Argentina. Um, he was convinced by these tech guys that they could raise a lot of money for Argentinian businesses. So for example, they could start selling these meme coins, and they instead of like it would replicate in a capital market instead of and like since they don't have capital markets, so businesses could start raising money, and that's what Molay thought. Now the guys that he went with I don't think had any previous history of scandal. I'm not sure, but they did when they did it. They did stack it or something like they call it. So they sort of rugged and tugged it. Now, this was something that I don't Malay hasn't profited off of. There's no evidence of that. There is evidence that some people did, but Malay actually was sort of hurt like just anybody else. So he did a tweet and saying buy this thing, and so when they released this coin, it raised a lot of money, and then it crashed. But like when you're doing these coins, it's a casino, and that's what Malay said. It's a casino. That's when you're buying these coins, it's a casino. It's and they were supposed to raise 100 something million dollars for Argentinian businesses, but I think Malay's who he's not seem doesn't never not seem to be incentivized by money and trying to make money. I think Malay was a little naive in that trying to do it, but I see where he was coming from, trying to raise money for businesses, trying to create this market. And there was a lot of these meme coins going up, right? The Trump coin just was right before this. So I think that he thought it could have been good and could have raised a lot of money and could have been like a way to sort of replicate capital markets. And it turned out that it failed. And that's what happens sometimes when you do new technologies and stuff. And sure, it very slightly, I think, slightly hurt him politically, a little bit. Most people have forgotten about it, or because the things were getting better, they didn't really care. But yeah, that's the story. Most people don't believe that Malay was trying to do it maliciously, but it didn't turn out so good.
Gotcha. Yeah, I have mixed feelings on the crypto stuff too. I mean, I do think that on one hand, like a good Austrian libertarian, it's personal responsibility. People need to kind of like uh know when they're investing in anything that there's risk and take on that risk. And if they gamble and it blows up in their face, I don't necessarily feel like. I mean, it's like going to the casino and then like uh railing against the casino. It's like, well, did you not know what you were getting into? I mean, so I guess there's that. I also do understand though why I think it can at least appear and maybe feel a little bit slimy when like people who are in power are trying to do these things, and there's at least the perception that they might profit off of them, or that
Mhm.
they could profit off of these things while other people are losing money. And I don't know enough about it to fact check if you're correct, if he did or didn't make any money. But um, there's I guess that certain,
Can't
like,
blame
if you're in a position where you're in the leadership of a government, and you could use your position to potentially profit on a market endeavor. It's one of those. As an ANCAP, I don't even know where I stand on that, because it's kind of asking a false question. It's like I don't believe in government to begin with. So, like, should the criminal organizations be allowed to do criminal, potentially conflict of interest
well,
things? I don't know, but um, you know,
can I put in
yeah, sure,
in that agreement there were this coin was supposed to give a lot of money to entrepreneurs, to raise money for entrepreneurs, to a fund that gave it to entrepreneurs. So that was what the money was. Most of the money was allocated for, and um, I haven't looked in it, but the guys that ran it said they have 100 and something million for Argentinian entrepreneurs to put in a fund that they can get grants on and etc. So that was where the money was supposed to go. Yes, I do think these guys scam people, and I think they scam Milei too, to be honest. So, um, and
yeah.
and
There's
and
there,
so like, but they were going. These things were pretty hot at the time too. The Trump
right.
coin just came out. I think Melania or had a coin that just came out. There was a lot of these coins coming out at that time. So I think people I think they convinced Malay to and all he did was do a tweet. That's all he did. He did a tweet, said buy this coin. So
Not fair enough. Um, So something this might be where I'm the most critical of Malay, and this is something that came up in the debate as well. This idea of Argentina acting as kind of a vassal state for America and for American foreign policy interests, and the extent to which and it's not even just at times. It doesn't seem like Javier is just sort of gone along with things, but that he's like weighed in on uh, foreign policy events in ways that kind of cut against, where I think a sort of raw Austrio ANCAP should be leaning. I mean, this is of course one of the major reasons why Hoppe kind of disavowed Malay a little bit, was because of his sort of willingness to sort of be a vassal of the American state, sort of taking the side of Israel and uh, Ukraine. And then, of course, I think there's even been, talks about foreign aid going from America to Argentina, or that there has been foreign aid. I didn't get a chance to to look into that bit specifically, um, but I'm sure that's one of those things where it's complicated, because you can maybe feel like, yeah, Argentinians in Malay could be like, even with all their measures they're doing, they were climbing out of a hole. So maybe foreign aid from America and aligning with American foreign policy interests to get that can kind of make a little bit of sense in a Machiavellian way. But it's certainly going to be something I think libertarians are going to be frustrated on, not just for the foreign aid component, but also like, if we're gonna have someone in the world who's like, I'm a libertarian leader of a state, and then his foreign policy takes are just garbage, it's gonna be, even if it's a forgivable offense, it's still gonna be an offense. And that's kind of where I stand on it.
okay, so I will say that Argentina was becoming a vassal state. It was becoming a vassal state to China, and with and they were joining BRICS, which BRICS, and this is a little bit of a rant I'm going to give right now. It's a little, but there seems to be a large, big emphasis, obsession with geopolitics right now. Obsession, where don't get me wrong, I dig geopolitics too. It's like crack, but people seem to be obsessed with it, and that's like all they care about is geopolitics. But what really matters for most people is not geopolitics so much. I mean, when you're getting bombed, I guess, but but how do the laws and the government that you live under. And so a lot of these people will ignore what Milei has done domestically, which is what he has done domestically is 99.9% of what he's done as president is on Argentina, is Argentina first, is making Argentina sovereign, make it not becoming a vassal state, making its own power. That's his goal, is to make it a national power, a worldwide power, a rich country. And by the way, people talk about this Milei on his foreign policy, but what is his foreign policy? Milei will give verbal support to people, but Milei believes in peace. Milei realizes, like Rothbard, like libertarians, that wars are extremely harmful. Wars are extremely for every bomb that you build, you bombed. You're taking a house or a car, or business. Like you're taking that from it. He understands the power of trade-offs and all of those things, and so Milei's not pro-war at all. In fact, he gave a speech to the peace summit, and he basically, unlike everybody else, was like, oh, we need to go after Russia. This was back in the Russian war was even more in focus. He was like, we need to probably reinsert Russia to the world economy. You need to become friends with your enemies, your neighbors. Otherwise, you go bankrupt and stuff like that. Use the Bastiat when trade doesn't enter borders, bullets do. And Milei has talked about his goal for Argentina. His goal for Argentina is to be in South America and to be a protagonist trader, because Argentina has peaceful neighbors. Argentina is thousands of miles away from any conflicts, and he doesn't have to worry about all the conflicts. He says he wants to be a country that solves global problems and with trade. And by the way, everybody talks about China and these things, and everybody, like he said, I will not work with China before. The Chinese love Milei. In fact, there was reporting, you can look on my timeline, about the Chinese calling him a saint. Why? Because he trades with them. He gives the Chinese tons of beef, and it's lowered their beef prices, and so they're eating more beef. And that's how Milei tries to envisions his foreign policy, as being a protagonist trader. And so he's not becoming a vassal state. They were a vassal state, becoming a vassal state because they were becoming so dysfunctional that they had to rely on China. But now they're becoming solvent. Now they're getting to global debt markets. Now they're controlling their own country. They don't have to rely on selling debt to China. And in regard to like getting some foreign aid, they didn't get any foreign aid from the U.S. They got a swap, which is basically they sent pesos to the USA and US sent dollars. It's because Argentina owes a lot in foreign currency, but Argentina only took 2.5 billion and paid it back within 2 months. And so it's United States has swaps with a lot of countries, including Canada and Mexico and Norway and Switzerland and the EU and Japan and Korea. So they didn't take any foreign aid, and I don't see any. They are friendly with the United States, for sure. And the right in South America and the left in South America hate the United States. For the longest time, Argentina hated the United States. The Peronists hate the United States. They hate the West. They were butting up with Maduro in Venezuela. I'm not even lying. My point is, like, there's so much focus on this geopolitics. There's not a lot of focus on the actual policies that's going on in Argentina, and even the geopolitics of Argentina. What Milei believes is peace. He says it. I can show you the proof where he says these things. And in fact, he retweeted me this week when I said these things, and so I don't totally get looking at hating Milei over geopolitics when he's improving the lives of the people in Argentina. Sorry, that's a long rant. I hope
it's coherent. It's coherent. And to be fair, like, I don't think you maybe meant this towards me. Like, I don't hate Milei. I think some people do. But the way I phrased it was, I do think it's understandable when libertarians will take offense at certain things, like, especially because, like, it'd be one thing if he was just like I don't know, just a random leader of state, but when it's someone who's literally quoted Hoppe and Rothbard and whatnot, and then even if he has other statements which soften these kind of like bad statements, when it's kind of like, again, I don't want to. Well, I want to say two things here because I also want to respond to your broader point about geopolitics. But, like, I do think that there is something about, like, he's acting out incentives, and he has to sort of choose not to say the brave, more correct thing regarding some of these conflicts. And I can kind of get that, but I can also understand why people might judge him for it. And I have mixed feelings about it because I just think that, like, wow, there are really, even it's like, yeah, fine, your responsibility is Argentina and Argentinians. You're Argentina first. But, like, just don't weigh in on the foreign policy stuff at all. But when you weigh in and it's in support of all of the American regime allies at the expense of, especially like in the Israel stuff, when we're talking about, just that, the horrible atrocities that have befallen the Palestinian people and how many people there have died. It just comes across a little bit as tone deaf, I guess, is where I'm coming from. As far as the broader focus on geopolitics, I mean, I think on one hand, it's sort of an emotional thing because when you see war, it's ugly. And when you see, like, women and children and whatnot, in war-torn situations, I think people rightfully get angry at that. And also, I mean, it's just the basic, like, war is the health of the state. So, like, I feel like to some extent there is this sort of important. I think it's important for us as libertarians to kind of be talking about geopolitics because it's sort of like, because there is this belief in the need for an American empire, for American hegemony across the world, that then supports the idea of why we need the Federal Reserve and giant money printers and all this other stuff. And yeah, just like it upholds the sort of like liberal order, right? Or global order that we operate under, which we despise. And so, the connection between foreign policy and domestic policy is very real for Americans. And I think, so, I mean, even if you want to say there's some reason for maybe Milei not to be as animated by that, I do think that there is just cause for American libertarians and even European ones to be especially animated by that.
I wish the United States had Argentina's foreign policy. I wish they just talked about, I wish he just gave diplomatic solidarity. I wish Trump just gave diplomatic solidarity to Israel and didn't send Israel any money. I wish I wish that they had Malay's foreign policy where
Well, I hear you, but
Malay is not the United States. It's a different country. They have different goals. And yes, he wants to get along with the United States. The United States is one of the most capitalist, with the best capital markets in the world. And yes, of course, he wants to get along with the United States. Why wouldn't he? The previous government, the only people they got along with was like Maduro and all these people. And I'm being serious. So they're not the United States. Argentina doesn't have any offensive position, any very offensive weaponry. They don't plan on buying any, and that's not their goal. But their goal is for Malay is to get along with the United States, which is the big boy on their neighborhood, and it's worked out for them. They just had an Argentina week this week, and they're getting billions of dollars of capital on Wall Street. This is private money, not any government stuff, but so it's not the same. When people would toad into these people look at Argentina and try to act like Malay is the same as the politicians. Argentina doesn't have an APAC. Argentina doesn't have the same stuff that we have. Argentina doesn't fund wars, nor do they want to. And by the way, Argentina's been neutral for many decades. In World War I, they were neutral. World War II, they were neutral. They were largely neutral during the Cold War. They were neutral during the War on Terror. So they have a long history of not going to war, and Milei doesn't want to change that. So I just don't I'm not understanding. I wish the United States had their foreign policy of more of staying out of people's conflicts, and maybe giving some diplomatic support to the people they like more. In the right wing in South America, it's not just Milei. It's Cast in Chile. It's Peña in Paraguay. It was Bolsonaro in Brazil. They all like Israel in the United States. And why? Because they view them more as like Western developed capitalist countries relative to their neighbors and stuff. And they look up to these countries. I think Israel has the same GDP as Argentina, and Israel is the small country it is. So they look up to the United States, especially when the left is so opposed to these countries, like, for what they say, for imperialism or whatnot. That like a lot of them, they all come back. The right is all that way in South America. And I asked Scott Horton about this, and he's like, yeah, that's just how the right is all over the world. And we're so passionate. Let me make a scenario for you, Jacob. Let's say that India, we just learned that is like, allying with Israel, right? Let's say that United States didn't fund Israel. It was India that funded Israel. India was funding the war in Gaza. The war atrocities and all the stuff with it that is. Would you think that Nick Fuentes would care? Do you think the right would care? Do you think Dave Smith? Would you talk about it if India was funding it? Would you care? You actually might be on the side of Israel. Seriously, like if we weren't funding it, like the Argentinians aren't funding it, and somebody else was, would you care? Do you care about the Armenian and Azerbaijan conflict? What about Pakistan and India? Do you care? We don't fund those, or very much. So that's why we care, because we fund it. And Argentina doesn't. So they can do what they want on the sideline. They don't have blood on their hands. And the same, like, would you care? Honestly, would you care if India was like, would Toad care? No, I don't think Toad would care. And so like, but he thinks that Malay should be just like the Americans who have spent hundreds of billions of dollars on the conflict. No, it's a different country.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I think that there is some fairness to, it's a different country. They're not funding these things.
Or
They
would
have
you
their
care?
own
How much
problems.
would you care? Would you be talk about? Do
Me
you think Nick?
me
Let me question.
personally,
Do you think Nick Fuentes would care if
I can't
India was
speak.
funding it, not the United States?
I don't care about Nick Fuentes, but
I know.
just
I'm
for
just saying
my
that right in general. Dave Smith. I don't think so.
um I think it's hard for me to think of what the world would look like if America wasn't an empire doing all these things and then just India's funding Israel. I mean, it's just such a
I know
weird
it's a
hypothetical.
hypothetical.
It's
But do you care about the Azerbaijan Armenia? Did you have a huge thing? You know, they
the
ethnically
difference.
cleansed Armenians. You know that, right?
Yeah, and that's horrible. I think that, and I think it's bad that the media doesn't talk about these genocides
Nobody.
enough.
I never heard Dave Smith talking about it. And I love Dave. I love, Robbie's my good friend. He comes to the Shell every year to do comedy. I love both of them. It's just a hypothetical. And
Yeah,
so,
I think it's well,
I'm just pointing out like how sort of hypocrisy it is when,
there,
like
there
when Americans like,
hypocrisy, or the appearance of the hypocrisy, is the inevitable result of limited human time and outrage, which is that it's just impossible to be
and
equally outraged
the
about
Argentinians don't know
every.
anything about foreign policy. Milei is very and I've been listening to him for 8 years, a lot. And he said the most I've ever heard him say about foreign policy, I'm serious, is like a few sentences. Like he never goes in depth, never talks about it. In fact, there was a funny moment a couple when he got elected. Is the British journalist came up to Milei and said, Liz Truss is your Liz Truss's favorite politician. Liz Truss was the prime minister of England, and Milei did not know who she was. He didn't even know who she was. So he doesn't seem to follow foreign politics. They don't also have a Scott Horton down there. They don't have like, they're just not animated by foreign policy like we are, because we're the empire. They're not.
I would be more inclined to agree with you if he really did stay out, but just, I mean, the quotes I've seen of Milei, and maybe you can tell me that I'm missing context or they're made up, but I've seen him say things like, "I am the biggest Zionist there are." I've seen him going along with the, like, Iran is the biggest threat to Western
So
civilization in the world. I've seen him, and I think it's one thing to kind of like strategically be like, yeah, our people like America and Israel, so I'm not going to go out of my way to be shitty with them. But
mhm.
it does seem like if he doesn't want to be in the lane of foreign policy, he should have just stayed completely out of the lane of foreign
Well,
policy.
here's one thing though that you don't know. In Argentina, like I said, has been a peaceful country. No wars. They did the Falkland Islands thing in the 80s, but that's a more of a nationalist thing. In the 1990s, they got bombed twice. Their Jewish center got bombed twice. Once I think it was 1992, and once you can look this up. And they killed over 100 people, and they didn't. It was a completely unprovoked attack. And who did the courts blame for it? They blamed Iran because these were Shiites. I think they were associated with Hezbollah, and they, for some reason, they bombed Argentina twice. Now, I have friends in Argentina that are like, oh yeah, they went into the Iranian government, and like the Iranians didn't prosecute them, nothing. And I think there's some truth to that. Now, do I think Iran did the order to bomb and they lost over 100 people. And the Argentinians, this is something that they still are pissed off about, and Milei is pissed off about. He was 20 years old at the time, I think. So, um, uh, um, so they do have a very bad bias against Iran. They just do, because they blame those bombs on Iran. So that's the only and completely, it wasn't like the United States. They didn't have a base in Saudi Arabia like we did. They just got bombed. And I think they might have been a couple just crazy guys that did it. But the Argentinian courts and the Argentinian public all blamed Iran. and you can look more into the details. I mean, I know people that have really looked into it, like, oh yeah, Iran was behind it. I don't know why they would bomb Argentina and kill so many people, like a lot of people, but
And I don't know either. And it's also one of these things where
but
I'm sure
it's one reason. That's one of the reasons why Milei doesn't like the Iranians, is because in a lot of, just in people in general, people don't like the Iranians. And the Jews, they've never been a problem. Israel's never been a problem to Argentina. Israel's never been a problem, and they have like 1% Jews, no Muslims, and there is Islamophobia in Argentina for sure. It's about the opposite culture you'd ever expect from Muslim culture. They're very free, open, bikini thongs on the beach, that sort of thing. And so there's a little bit of Islamophobia. They got bombed by Iran. The Jews in Argentina are generally very accepted people in the country. They don't cause any problems. And so of course they really, and that's one of the reasons why Milei he was like, yeah, this guy bombed us. And he's not an APAC guy. Milei, just like he's a Catholic, but he likes the Jewish traditions and religion, and he kind of roots for them as a people. It's not out of getting bribed or blackmailed by them. He actually legitimately likes them as a bystander in Argentina.
and listen, there are extremes in this conversation that I do my best to avoid. I think there are some people, like you mentioned, Toad, who Toad and I had a falling out actually because he thought I don't go hard enough after Israel, even myself, and thought, and I'm Jewish. So, I mean, I'm Christian, but
He's
I'm
one that
ethnically Jewish.
only cares about geopolitics. That's my point.
Well, I think it's more. I think he only cares about.
Like I said, I do think geopolitics is important, but you should also care about the governments people run. Toad is more. People like in Daniel McAdams are way more sympathetic to like the Cuban government, which he's spent time actually with Cuban leaders of the Cuban government, chowing down or Maduro, than people like Milei. It's unbelievable. They won't criticize them, even protect them or chum with them. But Milei they just despise, and even Cast. I've seen Cast in Chile who just got elected. Despise. And
I think,
but for some reason, then Orban, by the way, is a big Zionist, and they don't know what to think about him.
yeah, I think it's one of these things where, because a lot of the libertarian movement in the world is in America, and because we're steep, and it's not just like modern liberal. I mean, Rothbard was very critical of what was going on, even in his time between Israel and Gaza, and wrote a lot about it. Hoppe as well, and so I mean, for the most part, the Austro-libertarian world has kind of been united on foreign policy, and there are just notable exceptions. There's like Walter Block. I can't even think of any other examples than Walter Block as a pretty, someone who deviates on that. But as I said, I think we can end this on this. I understand the offense that people in, our crowd take towards it. Do I think it's a forgivable offense on balance when everything else is taken? Yeah.
Do you think they have any know that Argentina was bombed twice by what they consider Iran? And my point is, generally people don't understand what's going on, and they literally think that Milei is pro-war, which is just not true.
I mean, he's said some clumsy things which come across as being like, on the Ukraine thing. He said, like, it's not acceptable that the war could end without Ukraine getting all of its land back. And like, and it's like,
but he doesn't know. I know Milei, and I've seen him talk about, it's like literally one or two sentences. He doesn't follow it.
Well, and I just feel like, again, I'm trying to be sympathetic. I find those, I mean, I get annoyed by them, and I wish he would just, if he's not going to do, which I'm not saying he should, if he just wants to focus on Argentina, focus on Argentina.
What he does.
It's just when he
99.9% of the time.
Yeah. but some of the, but I mean,
Seriously.
but the 0.1% of the time when he comments on
It's
foreign
usually people
policy,
asking him questions in interviews. That's like literally all it. It's usually people asking him questions in interviews. That's where most of the, almost all of the things he doesn't really talk about it on his own. It's like literally questions in interviews.
no, I get that,
Um,
but I mean, he could also
he
just say
did
like
do a
no
speech
comment.
at the.
You
He
could
did
just
do a
say, "Hey,
speech.
I'm focused on Argentina. I don't, I'm not going to worry about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine or Israel and Gaza. It's outside of my, outside of my expertise." Again, I'm not trying to sit here and say let's discount everything good Malay's done because of this. And I think you're providing some important context for why not just Malay but Argentinians uh, feel the way they feel. And I can understand it, but I just also think you can understand why American libertarians and European libertarians are going to be like, it's at the very least a bitter pill that the the one libertarian head of state we have has not his public statements on foreign policy have just kind of not been
That's
up to
that's
the
that's
snuff.
because his positive statements they don't promote. That's one reason. Nobody, if he says something like, I don't like war, I want to be a peaceful country that lives here in South America and trades with the world and doesn't cause problems, that never gets highlighted. I mean, I,
I,
I post
yeah.
about it. I can prove that he says these things a lot.
Well,
Um,
send me those posts and I will retweet them myself after the show because I do want to, if he said positive things too, then yeah, we should also promote those things and push back against because my frustration is I don't want to see the libertarian movement co-opted by people who have a more hawkish view of the world and foreign policy, and then they see Malay with some of his comments and there are people who I'm not saying they're the majority, but there's a small minority of certain types of libertarian and libertarian adjacent people, like Austin Peterson comes to mind, who are
yeah,
like trying to use Malay as like a model to be like, see, we can be neocons and libertarians. And that I'm sorry, like maybe I'm like one of these people that's not as far as
that's not
Toad, but still focused too much on geopolitics. But that stuff just pisses me off, and
like
it's
I
hard.
said. I would love to have Malay's foreign policy.
Yeah. No, I think you brought up some good points. And again, this was the stuff I knew would be the most contentious, but I think you have some legitimate points to his defense. And so I don't have anything else, I think, in terms of questions about what was going on. I mean, I think, yeah, in general, like my biggest disappointments with Malay are on foreign policy stuff, but also like he's a South American president. So I
They don't
don't
know
weigh
that.
that. I don't weigh, even though it bothers me, but it's not that I sit here saying, and we have to throw everything good he's doing out. I am still rooting for him. I'm rooting for Argentina. I'm rooting for them to be a beacon of liberty in South America. Um, I would caution him to like if there's there's a strategic point of aligning with America to some extent, but just beware the frog and scorpion. Uh, old wise
Do,
tale as
do,
well.
do you
So
know the U.S. Cooed Bolsonaro? So like that's we know that. So I would advise not to get on the bad side of the U.S.
no, like I said, don't I understand not wanting to get on the bad side, but there's also the you know it's tough. I mean, heck, seeing what happened, and I'm not saying Maduro was a good dude, but seeing what happened to Maduro is just another reason why, if you're a South American leader, even if you're a libertarian, you might, hey, listen, maybe it's even possible that Milei has some private reservations against America, but he just thinks that, like, yeah, I can't really be too much of an American critic because that's going to be a bad, at least short term, medium term strategy. So, all good points. Appreciate this conversation. Anything you want to end on? Anything you want to plug before we hop off?
Yeah, I live up here in New Hampshire, and we have one of the places. The only other place where liberty is winning besides Argentina is New Hampshire. And you're talking about politicians. We have so many people, Ron Paulians, hardcore liberty people elected in our state house that we run a lot of the government here. We have such an impact. We have the most amazing practical, brilliant state reps, 100 of them elected. They're incredible. So most this is where the libertarian movement is working here. We have a beautiful, incredible, like, vibrant social libertarian culture here. I run a libertarian clubhouse that's wildly successful, but we have a lot going on here. And every libertarian needs to at least come up here once. I don't want to be, I know this is a Christian, but like this is like your secular Mecca. You need to come up here once and experience it. You can stay at my friend Dennis's Independence Inn, and he'll guide you to different things going on. But it's a wonderful place, and it's working. The concentration model is working, very wildly successful. And we get more and more people up here. It'll start working even more. We're taking over all the all the town governments, all the counties. We're getting in the Senate. We have a potential governor candidate, and we obviously took over the House already. So and it's just incredible. So take a look about coming up here, visit the Shell, which I'm associated with. It's pretty cool. So come up here, hang out with us. There's a lot of really smart people up here and a lot of really fun social activities and everything from homeschooling to guns to crypto to everything, politics.
Yeah, I've yet to make the Mecca trip. Probably next year. I want to say.
Just let me know, man. I'll show you around. I was pretty intense in this interview. Most people know that I'm a pretty nice guy.
Yeah. Well, no, and I wasn't offended by any of it. And I mean, listen, it'd be weird to have two libertarians on a show and there isn't any fighting. I mean, come on. Anyway, that was a good conversation, Scott. I look forward to hopefully coming to New Hampshire sometime soon and meeting you and all my crazy libertarian New Hampshire radicals up there. Pennsylvania is kind of like this weird thing where it sucks, but at least everyone around us sucks worse.
I thought you were in Iowa, so you're even closer. No. So it's even closer of a trip for you.
Yeah, it wouldn't be hard. The only thing holding us back right now is we have too many plans this year, and our youngest is only 1, so it's like, but next year she'll be 2.5 next year, so it'll be a much easier thing. But when we're also we're getting into camping, so I'm trying to actually level up our camping skills until so New Hampshire camping at Freedom Fest will be kind of the final boss of
nice
that development.
Fest, which they're changing this year, but I think it'll live on. So
yeah. All right. Well, good talking with you, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us. Make sure that you like this video, share it around if you want more people to just hear more about what's going on in Argentina and what Milei is doing. And hopefully this was also a good example of how libertarians can disagree amicably. We need more of that in our movement. I am, of course, here every Monday evening here in the Green Room. But we've been doing more shows lately. I'm also going to be here sometime this weekend. I think it's going to be Sunday night, but we might even move it up to Saturday night or sooner with Phil Rain from the Libertarian Party Alliance. And then Dave DeCamp is going to be on the show for our next Monday night guest. And that'll be a little bit early, actually. We're going to be doing that at 6:00 p.m. That'll be on Monday, the 16th. So make sure you are subscribed, get notifications, follow me at Biblical Anarchy, and talk to you guys soon. Take care. Have a good night.